Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works. And it is part 3 of our 1/48 scale Royal Navy Sea Harrier, and this is by Tamiya. This is basically the original kit that they tooled in the early 80s. It's probably been a repop, but they haven't made any changes to it, so it's basically what they released back in the 80s. So, this is what we've got done so far. We've got our lumpy airframe together. Got our dude in the cockpit. As you can see, there's a little bit more assembly to go on the bottom. I think probably our next step is going to be making sure we've got our air brakes and our pylons and everything all ready to go, and then I'm going to be airbrushing the bottom of it white. And of course, we will flip it over and airbrush the top of it Royal Navy blue or whatever that color is. I know I've got a bottle of it around here somewhere. So, I don't foresee any huge difficulties, so you know I'm doomed. And there's nothing to say, but let's get at it. I'm keeping the selection of stores fairly light on this build. Basically, I'm going to go with the sidewinders on the outer pylons, and I'm just going to go with the drop tanks on the inners. And to that end, I've got the drop tanks together, a little bit of putty. You can see just where the molding, the sprues were attached. So not very good. There we go. Just a little bit of putty on there. And the sidewinder pylons themselves, they go on quite nicely. As you can see, they fit well. There's just a little notch right there on each side to make sure they register exactly right. So I think I'm ready for painting the underside. I've got some toilet paper stuffed here into the front landing gear bay. I've got some in the air inlets. I've got a little bit of tape over top of the cockpit. Not that we're going to be spraying the upper surface, but we don't want any overspray to get on there. And I'm basically going to use the two-step process. First of all, I'm going to paint it using Tester's white primer. And then I'm probably going to use Tamiya gloss white for the underside. And hitting it with the testers first will do 90% of the job so that I don't have to put on so much of the Tamiya. And to tell you the truth, there's a couple colors of paint that we're starting to get a little thin on in terms of how much we have on hand. So most of our local hobby shops are closed. Matter of fact, they're all closed. So you kind of have to coast on whatever supplies you have on hand during the pandemic. So there's our nice white underbelly. And I'm ready to start masking the undersurfaces so we can do the dark blue on the top. And once again, this is the danger of not thinking things through. And I've never admitted that I'm a particularly bright individual, but I really should have just left these pylons off till later, because they're going to make my masking a whole lot more difficult. I think I was just hell-bent on getting all the underside stuff done so I could give it a nice coat of white paint. So yeah, these pylons will be a lot more difficult to mask, but I think it's still doable. Right, well, as you can see, I've got the underside of our plane fully masked here, hopefully. I'm sure I'll spray the paint on and find that I've missed a bunch of spots. But we've got the masking done. We've got our jet back from paint. As you can see, we've got that dark mix of royal blue plus the extra dark gray. And I've started doing some of the little detail bits. This bit here on the top of the tail is supposed to be a mix of yellow and buff. As well, on the underside here, I've got the gun metal on the hot exhaust. As well as that, the nose has been painted semi-gloss black. Now, oftentimes in the past, I would have masked my canopy with all the various bracing and everything like that with the mask all. This time I just painted the whole thing with mask all, and then I'm just going to hand paint the framing on, which is a little bit of a deviation from what I'll often do, but I don't think it's that big a deal. I'm also working on painting the various landing gear bits. And of course, our louvers, our exhaust louvers. Here's one of the front ones. It's been painted with that same mixture of blue and dark gray. And then somewhere, here you go, here's one of the hot exhausts. And once again, it's been painted with gunmetal. As usual, when I'm finishing up a project, I don't film as much as I should, mostly because it's like, do this little thing, do that little thing, put this little thing on. I just thought it was worth pointing out the way Tamiya has you install the landing gear. You can see there's a substantial, not really basically, I guess, a mortise on either side of this big lug, and it just slides in here. It's a very, very positive, massive attachment. And I just compare that to some other kits where there's the slightest bit of a dimple and you're supposed to put a leg on it and have it support the weight of the aircraft. So, but once again, this front landing gear piece, this is all one part. This is all one molding. So we've got most of the little detail painting done. I'm sure there's something I've forgotten. Seems like it's been about a day and a half. Touching up and putting on all the little extra bits of color they're supposed to be. But we're finally ready to start decaling, which I always like to refer to as the icing on the cake. Decaling must be done. My sheet looks like the dog chewed on it. And we have a nice big pile of leftovers from the backing sheets. Boy, jet fighters have got so many markings on them. Okay, we're really on the home stretch here. As you can see, all the decals are on. I have the front of the canopy glued on. I've got the sight glued on there as well. There's a couple of small things that need to be painted, I noticed. While doing the decals, there's kind of the tendency would be called a rubber bumper, but I think it's basically the very end of this part here is flat black, and there's probably some sort of an antenna there. A couple other things. You can see I've got the nozzles in. They are not working in tandem. They don't seem to be indexing very well, but I'm not planning on playing with this, so I'm just going to leave them the way they are. Like I said, we're pretty much down to just the last few details and doing things like putting the missiles on. One thing you will notice is that the pitot tube here is a little short. It should come out this far. I've already broken the sucker off, so you can see that's how much has to be glued on. So I'm either going to be replacing the whole thing with some stretch sprue or gluing that on. I don't know which. And the funny thing is, I think that was the first thing I broke off on this model when I built it when I was in my teens back in CFP Petawawa, is the pitot tube. It was the first thing I broke off. Actually, I've got it painted the extra dark gray, blue, whatever you want to call it, and that actually should be silver, so that's going to be corrected. And it is all done. The Sea Harrier by Tamiya. As I mentioned in part 1, this is actually the second go-around for me of this particular kit. And oddly enough, I have no idea where the original example that I built in my teens is. Which is strange because I've got almost every other model I've ever built. Don't know why this one escaped. Back in the 80s, I did have an airbrush, but I did not airbrush it. I just brush painted it. And, of course, trying to brush paint Tamiya gloss white, yeah, that was a headache. And even trying to get a nice, even finish of the blue was difficult. Much, much easier this time around. Now that one assumes that I know what the heck I'm doing. Despite knowing what I'm doing, I still repeated some of the same mistakes. In particular, if we flip it over, I forgot that I should not have installed these pylons here until after I put the decals on, so I had to split those rondelles and take a sliver out before I installed them. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the pitot tube, installed that way sooner than I should have. Still near the end, but I still managed to snap off the last 1 inch of it. I did manage to glue it back on again, but I'm sure fairly shortly something will snag on it and it'll get snapped off again. But that was the thing. That was the first thing that got broken on my previous build. Here's a close-up of the engine compartment. I'll do another one in the still shots, but it is worth having that hatch be removable, and it fits on really nicely, so it's not like it looks horrible when it's in place. Sometimes when they have hatches that open or removable, the fit is so bad you're best off gluing it closed. Not so with this. Here's a close-up of our exhaust louvers. You can see they're far more open than they would be if I had used the kit part stock. And I'm sure that somebody probably sells resin aftermarket parts, and that probably would have been easier than what I did, but you know, by now people should know I'm a fairly cheap bugger and, you know, would rather do it myself. There's the other side. So that's the end of this project. I have a few other lumpy British planes, I suppose the best way to describe them. You know, and I mean that in a nice way. For some reason or other, most post-war British aircraft have kind of an interesting lumpiness about them. They just have got all kinds of little bumps and protrusions and things like that, which I think is kind of neat. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, just keep on modeling.